am Joel McLeod, and welcome to the 905er. A lot has been going on lately in Ontario. It's a bit of a whirlwind to keep up with the latest news on what the provincial government is planning or not planning to do. A topic that we frequently revisit on this podcast is education. One of the first stories we really delved into was the Halton Catholic School Board's debate over whether to fly the pride flag at its schools. That simple debate turned into a bigger story that drew the attention of the province to Catholic education in general, as well as the issue of trustee governance and behavior. Since then, we have kept an eye on education, especially when it comes to how our schools work on the ground, which is why recent developments have, of course, caught our eye. I am, of course, talking about Minister of Education Paul Calandra's decision to remove elected trustees from 4 school boards and replace them with supervisors. His reasons? The mismanagement of tax dollars. It is no secret that school boards in recent years have come under fire for superfluous spending, such as the Brant Haldeman Catholic Board sending trustees to Europe for the purchase of $190,000 worth of art. The minister has also hinted at the notion of eliminating the role of trustees province-wide, which in the education system would mean boards coming under direct control of provincial appointees. But does this go too far? Well, this is too big an issue to solve in only one episode. So for this topic, we're doing 2 episodes. Each one focuses on a side of this topic, whether reform is needed in the way of eliminating elected trustees from school boards, or if there is still value in keeping this form of democracy so close to parents and students. For this episode, I reached out to Nokha Dakroub, former trustee for Peel District School Board, who recently penned an op-ed in the Toronto Star advocating for reform of school trustees by appointing a board akin to a police board. The op-ed is in the show notes for you to review. She joins me today to talk about her position. And as I said earlier, this is the first of a 2-part series. In my next episode, I will be joined by Andrea Grabant, former chair of the Halton District School Board, for her advocacy on why trustees need to remain in an elected position for our democracy. Okay, thank you, Nokha Dakroub, for coming on to the podcast, the 905 once again. Thank you for coming on to talk about the. I mean, of all issues, I never thought we'd be talking about the elimination or potential elimination of school board trustees in Ontario. But you know what? This is like 9 years into the Doug Ford Ontario PC government. So I think, let's just tip the table over and let's have at it. So, okay, thank you for coming on today to talk.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy being on this podcast.
The reason why I wanted to have you on was you wrote an op-ed in the Toronto Star. Link will be in the show notes, folks, for you to go read it yourself. But I'm not going to paraphrase because I have you here. Just give me the general synthesis of what your argument is in regards to the issue of whether or not we keep or not keep school board trustees in Ontario.
So my argument is that the current system is not working, and there are a number of reasons why, and we will get into that, I'm sure. But my argument is that it's time to professionalize school boards and do away with the electability of school board trustees, and appoint them just like we do hospital boards, police boards, library boards, and all sorts of other things.
So let's talk about the current state of how a school board school board is structured. And the general idea is the elected school board provides governance and really accountability for how our tax dollars are spent in our school boards. What is it that you want to? What is about that you think is flawed, or that where are the gaps in how we think it should be working
Right.
currently?
So the issue is the role of governance and I'm talking about pure governance of a board, and the electability nature of doing constituency work or responding to concerns from the community and being able to move things forward aren't always um, uh, don't always work very well together, right? So the entire structure, the way things are, it's almost like trustees have been set up to fail. They've
Hmm.
been set up um, to um, to have no authority, to have no public opinions, no ability to move things forward, um, which makes the notion of an elected official basically meaningless.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about like how a school board works
Mhm.
currently, I mean, I know there was a how it was written initially, like the model that we're working on is from the 19th century. It's really kind of
Right.
from like 1867. Confederation is founded, and they just said this is how every province kind of said this is how our schools will be operated. And now my understanding is the idea is the board was because schools were
But they
meant.
worked very differently back then.
Well, that's
Just
exactly my,
to interrupt you.
like
Yeah.
a school was meant to be you'd learn how to read, write. The idea was like you'd be able to because you work on a family farm probably,
Yeah.
so you'd be able to read the contract to sell your wares to market, and you can write so you can write your name to the contract, and you have a little bit of arithmetic math in your wheelhouse so you can make sure that you're not getting screwed over by the contract, and that's really it. The idea of like actual education was very rudimentary, and so you just that's what a board was meant for, just make sure okay the school board is kept open and the teachers being paid that that we can get a basic education out of it.
Right. And again, I don't have a problem with the actual structure of a board, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Ford government is talking about getting rid of school boards entirely. I think that would be a mistake. I think that would be a step way too far. And I think that would prove to be a bit of a disaster in terms of how you would be able to organize and deliver public education in a local setting,
Why is that?
because it's a lot of work. It's not, they're talking about, they haven't really thought it out, but they've talked about having four basically school boards for the entire province. Imagine having a special education department to deal with every special education student's needs in the entire province. Like that's just unbelievable. It just won't work. It'll turn into a complete nightmare of a bureaucracy. Now, some of their arguments that they make on that side is include that there's too much duplication in service and duplication in work, especially in between coterminous boards in terms of the Catholic board and the public board. That's fine. You can synergize. You can figure out ways to get people to work together, and maybe that's the next step and next conversation. And how do we break down the barriers, actually work together and deliver services to students, without having these artificial borders, if you want to call them that, in between boards. But going back to governance, the problem is, so you're right. Back then, it was a very different role. It was a very different purpose. But over time, what's happened is uh, regulations and more organization has had to be brought in by the Ministry of Education, really to reel in trustee behavior, right? I mean,
Mm.
the regulation, the Education Act that says that trustees can get involved in, which I talk about in the article. They can get involved in day-to-day operations, and they have to entrust. The wording is to entrust the director of education with the day-to-day operations of a school board. That's because you don't want trustees walking into schools and telling principals what to do. You don't
Right.
want that, right? And you know that
Well,
has happened.
there is. I mean, well, yeah. I mean, in fact, the structure is kind of similar to a municipal government, essentially, which is also very similar to the idea of like a not-for-profit
Mhm.
board. They're there to provide like an overall direction. Like, this is the direction that we want to set going forward. going to the municipality city manager or to the school board, the education director, say, make it happen now.
Mhm.
Figure out where the money's supposed to flow to make it happen.
Yeah.
Um, but I
Except
think,
the issues are very different.
well, that's just it. I think where it gets into the murky ground of school boards is that the directives come from the Ministry of Education. They're the ones who set up the curriculum. They're the ones who ultimately send out the money to, we want to fund more STEM. We want to fund or more put more trades programs into high schools, that kind of thing. They're the ones who ultimately set the direction. This is what you're going to be taught. School
Yeah.
boards, you just basically, okay, well, we need to buy more textbooks for high school A, and we need to put a coat of paint on the lab walls of high school B is kind of really what it comes down to.
I'll go a bit further. I served on the budget development committee for most of my time when I was at the school board for 8 years. I think there was only 1 year that I wasn't on the budget development
Mm,
committee. It was just something I was interested in. Um, Most of the money. So the board, I'll talk about Peel from my experience. The budget was around 1.8, 1.9 um, um, billion. So it's close to $2 billion of an operating budget. But the vast majority of that was enveloped because of collective agreements, right? So
right.
at the end of it, trustees really had to make decisions about somewhere between 5 to, I think the most I ever worked on was, you know, 10 to 14 million dollars, something like that. And I hope I don't get in trouble for sharing those numbers, but I don't think I would because we're just
Okay,
talking
but
about structure.
like what would be the thing that you'd be sitting around the table talking with the other trustees about? Because you're right, you said you're not talking about contracts, you're not talking about
No.
wage or salary increases or the spectrum, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What's the wiggle room that you're sitting there and you're going to stay up late into the evening talking with your fellow trustees about how do we spend $10 million?
Right. So, it would be things around um mainly business cases that would come through staff that are around needs of the system, whether it's more HR staff or more more I can't even specific initiatives that we're working on or things like that. But it wouldn't be necessarily like it would never ever be. Oh, EAs would often come in as that was actually the most impactful thing,
Mhm.
I would say, because uh, there's a difference between the EAs you hire as like permanent, and then you can add, we would be able to hire like additional EAs, and that would often come in through funds like that.
Right.
But in all honesty, it would never be that we're going to have an extra like, teacher or like an extra, because that just doesn't happen. That's just not how it
Right.
works. All of that comes directly from the province, and it's already completely decided. So really, you know, you're elected officials who are making very little decisions, who are basically there to move forward an agenda. And I'm not saying those things are not important. You do need to have some sort of, again, I'm not against having a board. I'm just against the electability of it, and there's
So
very many reasons for that.
so let's go on to that then.
Yeah.
What exactly is it that you're envisioning would be the ideal model for the 21st century in Ontario?
Well, let's talk a little bit about what the real problems are, right? So the real problems with trustees, with the way the model is now, is of course we talked a little bit about what the role is, and why it's not really that necessary, but also there's been a lot of trouble, right? We hear about boards being under supervision pretty regularly now, right? It's not something that's unheard of. And you don't hear that from about police boards. You don't hear that about hospital boards. Um, the level of accountability at the school board is very low because people get reelected based on name recognition over and over and over again. and with a very, very tiny, tiny percentage of the electorate, because most people don't actually vote for the school board. Most people don't even vote in municipal elections. The
Hmm.
turnout in municipal elections is somewhere around 21 to 25%, right? If you're really, really happy if it gets to 27,
Right.
right? Um, and even a smaller percentage of that is actually voting for the school board, because a lot of people actually leave it blank. So the electability of it is not really like, it's such a small percentage of
Well,
the population.
I remember I ran for Halton Catholic
Hmm.
school board years ago, and I remember knocking on doors, and like when you run, I'm sure you know, and I'm just letting our listeners know, you get a list of like for me, it was like every registered Catholic voter
Right.
in Burlington. That was where I was running
Yeah.
for. And so I figured, okay, what neighborhoods am I going to go? And I started knocking on doors, and the number of uh, elderly people, people retired people, or people who are parents who are literally like, no, my kid is in grade 12, they're graduating next year and they're out. It was such a that was the large number of people because they are Catholic.
Hmm.
They got on the list. So I was knocking on the door saying, and you're entitled to vote, can you vote for me? And this, I don't care, my kid is gone, or they've left the system, they're adults now.
Hmm.
I might care about my grandchild, but they're not even in Burlington, they're living, in London or wherever. And so there's that too as well. Like, you just, as you get older, you just get far more removed from the education system once your kids kind of age out, or you get to a point where you're just like, nah, I gotta cope through it for 3 more years.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree with that. And I'll add that most parents don't know who the trustee is. They don't know that there is a
Mm-hmm.
trustee. They don't know what a trustee does. They just see this person who shows up at graduation when their kid is done school, who gives a speech, right? Um, so so those are really my my concerns about it, from my experience. But also, I would say that there is a way forward, and we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And my answer to that is to professionalize school boards. So have an appointed board, appoint professionals who have some level of expertise in governance, some level of expertise in education. I'm not saying they all have to be teachers and educators. I don't think that's a good idea, because you need different perspectives, to help shape the system. Um, and have that done by an independent panel, or maybe perhaps the government could work on an independent office for appointments, because they do a lot of appointments, which would help kind of keep the partisanness out of it. It will never be nonpartisan. It's not nonpartisan now, like,
Mm-hmm.
let's be
Mm-hmm.
honest.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's always telling me, oh, but Noka, if they do that, then the government's going to appoint their people, and then
Right.
it's going to be a partisan, disaster, whatever. I'm like, it's a partisan disaster now. How many, and nothing against any of these people. I like a lot of these people. How many school board trustees were candidates in the previous provincial election for the Ontario Liberal Party?
Well, a lot of them also go on to run for conservative, like the
Yeah.
CPC, as well as the Ontario. So you're right. It is a lot of people view it as a stepping stone for provincial or sometimes federal aspirations.
Or municipal, right? But
Mhm.
so that's a part of it. But also, we can't say that, if it's going to be appointed, then it's going to be, this partisan. All these partisan hacks are going to be involved in it. It's already like that, right?
So, so just so I can summarize for our listeners, so you're thinking like something like a police board. So you would have an appointee of people who would have accounting backgrounds, grassroots kind of organization, business leaders in the community, as well as social activists of some sort, appointed by Minister of Education,
Yeah, I mean,
or
it
their office.
is no, not necessarily the minister's office directly. I would say, an independent panel that vets applications,
Mhm.
and it would be a public application process. And this could include former um, deputy ministers. This could include, former educators, former principals. It could include a lot of different people who are, from within the system and who are experts in education. Um, but they have to be local. That's very
Mhm.
important. They have to understand the needs of the community. They have to be reflective of the community, very similar to hospital boards, police boards, and all of that. It's not really, it's not an original idea because it is something that we already do. It's just we just need to move forward with the system because we can't keep
I,
going in circles.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm part of the reason why I want to do this was I don't myself. I'm trying to educate myself on the whole concept, but I'm just going to push back, play devil's advocate against you for a moment here. Like I think where this is coming from is we've seen stories of trustees from different boards, like I think in Grand River, Brett, taking spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to go on trips. I've heard of trips going around the world, and you say, why do you, or to go to Italy, like why do you have to go to these conferences? It does make sense, and it does seem like an abuse of tax dollars.
Mhm.
Would it be easier just to ban, to ban these trips for trustees? Say like trustees, like you can't use tax dollars for these trips if you want to go. Like that's just an expense that school boards can't put on the books. Or just to really tighten down, like what can trustees can and cannot do? What are they only allowed to vote for? What can only go on an agenda at the school board level? Just really kind of say that's that.
Absolutely, you can. But then why were they elected officials? If they if if you can't entrust an elected official, because what do elected officials do, right? What does the prime
Right.
minister do? He manages the whole budget of the whole country, right? The premier, he manages the budget of the entire province. That's what cabinet does. That's what elected officials are supposed to do. If you can't trust an elected official with taxpayer dollars, they're not an elected official, or they shouldn't be.
Well, the argument then is like, why do we not have government? Because there are people listening and saying you can't trust can't trust the guys at Queens Park, let alone Ottawa. Uh,
No, but I mean,
I understand what you're saying, though.
if you're gonna have
Yeah,
rules that say, you can't spend money on any this and that and the other thing. This is what you can do, and da, 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 then they're not real elected officials.
I I I see your argument, and but the next question then I have
Mhm.
is, okay, do you trust this government to put that into place given their track record? This is a government that does not shy away from cronyism. They do not shy away from scratching the backs of donors and their buddies. There's a long list of scandals and upcoming scandals. What you're talking about does leave the door open, in my opinion, to this kind of corruption where, yeah, I'll put you on a school board, and you can, I just need to quiet you away or give you some credential that you can run for me later. And I think people are pushing back on your idea because they just say, ultimately, I just don't trust this government to put forward the needs of schools, teachers, students first, no matter what the changes are. It's just do we can we trust this government to do the right thing? I guess is what I'm asking us.
Well, this is look. Do I trust this government? I don't think that's relevant. Can we all trust this government? I think the reality is you can't really trust any government to do to not appoint their friends or whatever it is. I think that's a question more around the rules of what the appointments would look like,
Mm-hmm.
and term limits would make a huge difference. And let's be very honest, there aren't that many people who are lined up who want to get appointed to a school board. It's not exactly a fancy appointment. It's not, and it's not going to be lucrative, because if they were to do this, and this is what I think they should do, they'd have to decrease the honorarium, especially if they're taking away the constituency work, because a lot of the, you don't have to answer phone calls, you don't have to do
Hmm.
all go to events and all these kinds of things. Then it's not going to be this very exciting appointment. And the reality is, the government appoints many positions that are way more prestigious than school boards. I think the I'll tell you a counter argument, because I do have a response for it.
Sure, sure.
um, One of the biggest counter arguments I hear is, Noka, if they appoint them, then who's going to stand up, and fight the government and advocate for students and da, da, da. My response to that is, that's not the job of a trustee. That's the job of the unions. That's what the associations are for. And I would argue that they do a fantastic job at that. And yes, the school board trustees can sit around and send a letter to the minister to embarrass him for 5 minutes during negotiations. But in my experience, and I've sent those letters, it's not going to make a huge impact, and it's not going to change the outcome.
Hmm.
So that's a really big argument out there that I've heard, that trustees are supposed to provide some level of pushback. I'd say they some of them do, for sure, and you hear this board sent a letter and this board sent a letter. But I would say that the unions and the associations do a fantastic job at that, and I don't think they're waiting around for trustees to help them, and I don't think it's going to make a huge impact if trustees didn't do that. And I would also argue that appointed boards can also send letters to the government. In fact,
Hmm.
they do.
The I hear what you're saying. I'm going to reframe my question in a different way.
Mhm.
I'm going to say, has this government wasted their good capital, their political capital with the public to push forward with it? I mean, we're talking ultimately kind of a massive overhaul to the education system, good or bad. Has this government just kind of blown through their political capital and their trust with the public to say that what they're doing is in the best interest of the public and not in their own self-interest to curry favors with?
I'm going to push back a little bit. You and I are, we know we're very similar in terms of where we are on the political spectrum,
Hmm.
so we see it that way, right? But Doug Ford is in the 50s in the polls,
Hmm.
right? He's won three majority governments back to back. Potentially, he might even win a fourth one, although it's far away, so we can't really know. We can't really tell for
Who
the
knows?
Um, I would say that they have plenty of political capital with voters. Voters seem to have written him a blank check, and he can do whatever he wants. The other thing that I would say is, voters don't care. They don't care about school board trustees. They really don't care. I've never met a voter. When I used to campaign for trustees, I'd say things like, "Are you going to go run for council?" To strike up a conversation. I'm friendly. People like me. Blah blah blah. Yeah, are you going to go run for council? Sorry, are you going to go vote for council? And they'd be like, yeah. I'd be like, well, while you're there, can you check my name off on the school board ballot as well? And they'd be like, sure, yeah, of course. They don't care.
I'll agree with you that is hard to. I mean, when I ran, I ran when there was a bit of a scandal brewing. The school board was trying to cancel, Terry Fox run and
Mhm.
jump rope for heart and these things, and that kind of stirred up the hornet's nest. But after that, it has died down, and there's just you know now I don't think anyone could tell me who their trustee is uh, currently. That I guess my next question is like, are we getting, is our current system kind of the best it can be? I guess no system is, but I wonder, like, why stop at the school board trustees? What would be the ideal school system?
Mm.
Because in my view, this is our biggest resource, right? This is the long-term investment in our economy, in our society,
Yeah.
that when our kids are coming I get frustrated with the talk of like, oh, we need, they need to be trained for good paying jobs. Like our schools don't train you to put the bolt in the door.
Yeah.
It's to be come up with the idea like, how do I put the bolt in the door better?
Mhm.
Right. Like, and I find like countries around the world, Finland has a great one. The Scandinavian countries have great education systems. We're seeing that China and South Korea, like the Asian countries, are just sky, the sky's the limit for their education system in terms of kids coming out equipped with kind of the tools for the future.
Mhm.
I'm worried that this argument, oh, we're going to do school trustees and or not, ultimately is just taking our eye off the ball of like, how do we make sure that our kids are coming out of school and are going to be ready for problems that we've never thought of.
Yeah. And I think those are perhaps different conversations. If you're asking me what I would do if I was the Minister of Education, I have a long
Yeah.
list of things that I would do. But I think this argument is really about cleaning up the governance of school boards so that it's no longer distracting.
Mhm.
So that the adults in the room are behaving the way they should. So it's no longer, I mean, how many times do you hear about a protest at a school board or this and that, or, some school board trustee that misbehaved or made a bad comment. And now there's all sorts of media stories about that. So this is about cleaning up governance so that the structure works well, that meetings are running smoothly, that work is gonna get done, and we're able to move forward, right? But there's so much to do in public education, and you're never going to be able to have a perfect system because a perfect system doesn't exist. And exactly, we need to look to other countries and see what they're doing and figure out how we can do that also. I think the biggest issue is the acrimonious relationship between the unions and the government. I wish that would be better, and they would work, better together in order for a shared goal in terms of what they want to see in public education. Um, that's an issue, that, and it's everybody likes to say it's the Ford government and it's Stephen Lecce's fault or whatever, but that's been the case for decades. For a long time, you'd say that education is where ministers go to die because they won't survive the fight with the union. So that's something that's important that needs to somehow that needs to be addressed. But there's so much to be done in public education. We have to support our special education students way better, way better. We are nowhere near the things that we need to do in special education. Um, Math, we need to focus a lot more on math, and teach our children math. I actually agree with the Ford government's move to go back to an older, more standard way of teaching math than the what the Win government had brought in. Um, Reading, we need to make sure our kids are reading. We need to make sure they're writing. There's so much that we need to do in public education. And we need to expose them to different ways of learning, to new skills that they're going to need, not just in the workforce, but in education and the way we you know deal with knowledge now and AI and all of those things. Um, we have to move away. And I think one of the things I used to talk about when I was a trustee is we need to move away from the old way of delivering education where you have to learn Shakespeare and all that. Nothing against Shakespeare, but um, there's only so much time that you spend in public education, and there's so much to learn. So some of it is also about kind of letting go of the things that we're doing so that we can make room to doing new things and teaching and learning new things. But that's a much larger conversation.
It is, but I guess that I think some of my listeners are going to be concerned that the this move
Yeah.
is meant to distract from the bigger core issues as you've described that we need to be focusing on. But as you said, that is going to be maybe the next episode we talk about. Um, and whatever have you. I know you have to get going, so I'm going to let you go. But I wanted to say thank you for this conversation. I think there's going to be an ongoing. We'll see how the minister and the premier roll out if they push through with this plan. And thanks for enlightening us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joel. It was a pleasure to be here.